If I were a betting man, I'd say Missouri will have its quarterback sometime this week. And let's revel some more in that Missouri victory over Kansas coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hail, you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball, reminding you that you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And I gotta say, now that the news is officially out there, as first reported by Gabe DeArmond over at Power Mizzou, but Sports Illustrated has it out there now as well. Miller Moss, the former USC quarterback, is going to be visiting Missouri tomorrow. So what does that mean? That means that his recruitment is probably going to be wrapping up here pretty quickly here in the next few days. Moss also reportedly has a visit to Louisville scheduled as well. Though if you're Missouri, you're getting the first crack at Moss, it would seem. You certainly hope to get the commitment that day, right? Hopefully we just shut it down after Tuesday or Wednesday, that type of deal. And Moss never gets to Louisville because it's pretty apparent that no matter what you think about Moss, I think most feelings by Missouri fans that I talk to are pretty positive on Moss, though there are some people who are negative on him for sure. Regardless of what you think, Eli Drinkwitz and his staff have obviously focused in. This is their number one option. So hopefully Missouri, unlike a few years ago when they just missed out on Jalon Daniels, for example, hopefully Miller Moss can be locked down by Eli Drinkwitz and company. But regardless, I think you're going to see Missouri. If I had to bet, I bet Moss is a Tiger by the end of the week. But I think some quarterback is going to be by next Monday, certainly, even though this is actually the first official day that the transfer portal is open. As I've said over and over again, this quarterback market's going to move quickly. I don't think we're going to have to wait more than a few days to find out exactly who is at least going to be competing for the starting job at Missouri next season. So that is mostly good news, I would say. Moss is considered one of the best and biggest and brightest names out there. So the fact that Missouri has zeroed in on him and sounds like they have a pretty good chance at him, basically us in Louisville, it sounds like. I like where this is heading. One thing I don't love where it's heading in some ways is Armand Membou is off to the NFL. Now, no offense, Armand. Congratulations. Hope you crush it. No hard feelings, anything like that. He's going to be a tough one to replace, though. The Missouri right tackle has just been really dominant in the run game in particular, a good pass protector as well. But, man, Membou is just moving human beings out of the way in the run game, especially in that outside zone scheme when he can get downfield against guys that are a lot smaller than him. Well, that's some good football porn for you right there if you like watching offensive linemen do their thing. But unfortunately, he's going to be a tough guy to replace, and Missouri was already looking at replacing a couple starters along the offensive line. Now make it 3. So that's going to be a tough one for Missouri. If offensive line already wasn't maybe one of the highest priorities for Missouri in the portal, which I got to imagine it already was, well, I think that steps it up a notch here. If you're the Andrew Luck of Missouri, in other words, you may have missed this, but Andrew Luck, the former Indianapolis Colts quarterback, former Stanford Cardinal, well, he's back at his alma mater, being the general manager of their program. These days, college teams at that level, you basically have to have some type of general manager. Now, of course, the coach is going to have a ton of input, obviously, into personnel decisions and all that good stuff. But my point here is that if you are the general manager, if that even is a real term at Missouri, but there's somebody in charge of NIL budgeting, that type of deal. Let's put it that way. Well, you got to put some more of your resources toward offensive line now with this Membou news for sure, because with Missouri certainly going to be breaking in a new starting quarterback next season, one way or the other. Well, the better the offensive line, the better that young man is going to look, no matter who it is, to make an obvious statement. And as you've surely heard by now and as discussed on my live show after the Kansas game yesterday, of course, Missouri is going to be taking on Iowa on December 30th in the Music City Bowl. And of course, we know that Luther Burden III is not going to be playing in that game. I haven't officially seen this, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that the man I just brought up, Armand Membou, won't be playing in that game as well as he gets ready for the NFL draft. But again, we'll see if we'll wait for official word there, I suppose. But it sounds like Iowa's maybe best player, arguably, it's running back Kaleb Johnson, is going to sit out the game. So the bottom line here, it's going to be interesting to see how many Hawkeyes are interested in actually playing in this game. How many Missouri players actually play in this game. Now, I have to assume Brady Cook is going to take one final ride. I don't think there's any question that he's going to be playing in this ball game. And just like him, I assume most of these guys are going to play in this ball game. But I do think you're going to see more guys sitting out with an injury that maybe would have pushed through it. Let's say if this were a playoff game, something like that. That I could certainly see. I think that's something you saw in the Armed Forces Bowl a few years ago, where some guys who had been playing through some nagging injuries during the season decided, you know what, let's get this baby surgically repaired. Let's get healthy for next season or preparing for the NFL, whatever it might be, instead of actually playing in that Armed Forces Bowl. Understandable decision that is, to be sure. But again, I think you'll have to almost wait until a few days before the game to get a decent idea of what type of Missouri and Iowa rosters you're actually looking at here. Because while there are going to be obvious guys, again, like Burden, like the Iowa running back Kaleb Johnson, who are going to be sitting out for NFL reasons, for pro reasons, again, just a few days before the game, look for that injury report, because that's going to really possibly move the betting line, for example, pretty significantly, I would think. And in case you missed it yesterday, with a whole lot of stuff happening, the Chiefs, the Tigers, bowls, all kinds of stuff, you may have missed that Barry Odom was officially hired yesterday by Purdue. So Barry, after turning it around at UNLV, about as tough of a job as there is, I would say, in Division I football, well, Purdue might be as tough of a job as there is in the Big Ten. That's for darn sure. Maybe other than Northwestern, but it's tough to win at Purdue. I'm frankly a little bit surprised that Odom didn't shoot a little bit higher, but you know what? I was also surprised that Odom didn't shoot a little bit higher than UNLV as well. And guess what? He proved me wrong. So apparently Barry Odom would like to prove me wrong again by going to Purdue. Interesting that Purdue had just been with Ryan Walters, who is basically Odom's protege, and now they're hiring Barry Odom. I'm trying to think of an analogous situation there. There aren't a ton of them, that's for darn sure. But you know what? I do want to revel in the Missouri-Kansas basketball victory here in just a little bit. But speaking of Kansas, I do want to mention one more thing about the Jayhawk football that is relevant to Missouri, because the Tigers do play Kansas next season on the football field as well at Faurot Field. And according to Pete Thamel's sources, KU quarterback Jalon Daniels has agreed to a, quote, new deal to stay with the Jayhawks for 2025, his final collegiate season. In 5 years in Lawrence, he's thrown for 6,700 yards and 45 touchdowns. So a sixth season for Jalon Daniels. Apparently those are still alive. I thought we were done with the sixth year in a post-COVID world, but no, we're still hanging in there for at least one more season. So that is really big news for Mizzou football next season, and what promises to be a really exciting Missouri-Kansas environment at Faurot Field next year. The first Missouri-Kansas game at Faurot since, I believe, 2006. Correct me if I'm wrong there. So really exciting times in Columbia right now. And of course, got to talk some more about that thrilling Mizzou victory over Kansas yesterday, including what it means for the rest of the season for the Tigers, in my opinion. And you know what? In a backwards way, maybe losing to South Carolina in football wasn't the worst thing that ever happened. I'll explain later. But first, let's talk about FanDuel, because you got to get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets. If you win, the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And I got to tell you, I love getting a hunch in the middle of the game and being able to check out the latest stats and see the play-by-play and so much more on the same page where I place my wagers. You'll check it out, too, when you visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started, again, with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So naturally, you've seen the college football playoff bracket by now, and the first 4 teams out, 9-3 Alabama, 10-2 Miami, and then 9-3 Ole Miss, 9-3 South Carolina. So speaking of South Carolina, obviously a lot of Missouri fans, including myself, have been asking, gosh, would Missouri have been in the playoff had they gone 10-2, had they just simply beaten South Carolina with no other changes and any other results? Well, it's a definite maybe, but ultimately when you look at how this played out with Arizona State, the number 12 seed, winning the Big 12, well, that meant number 11 in the rankings, Alabama, was edged out. And realistically, even if Missouri were ahead of Alabama, maybe they would have been despite taking a beat down from Alabama. I'm certainly dubious of that particular theory, but let's take it. For the sake of discussion, let's just say Missouri would have been 11th. Well, then they would have been left out as well, of course. It just doesn't seem like getting to 10 was in the cards for Missouri. Was Missouri going to be placed ahead of Indiana, for example? It just doesn't seem likely to me. That's just me. So really, and it is as heartbreaking as it was the end of that Gamecocks game to witness in person. Well, maybe in a backwards way, we would have avoided torturing ourselves and avoiding an Orange Bowl 2007 type of scenario, speaking of the Kansas Jayhawks once again. But you know what, since I'm bringing up the Jayhawks, let's get back to happier times when Missouri pulled an enormous upset yesterday. And the beauty of this is I think the Tigers just gave a whole bunch of people a reason to start watching Missouri basketball, because there's a whole bunch of, let's be honest, I'm a diehard Missouri basketball fan. I'm going to the Eastern Washington and Howard games and all that kind of stuff. But the vast majority of Missouri basketball fans are going to start paying attention about right now. And in the past, really, it's been the bragging rights game. Hey, if Missouri wins that game over the Christmas holiday, well, guess what? Missouri fans hop on the bandwagon and start paying attention and filling up Mizzou Arena during conference play. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened enough, obviously, in the past decade plus. But now with the Kansas game becoming a December special as well, well, for Missouri to finally have won this game, not only to have won, but Missouri had gotten blown out 2 years ago at Mizzou Arena, a game that, hey, it was loud as heck in Mizzou Arena right before the tip-off and all that good stuff, but Kansas jumped on the Tigers and just hammered them. So this was a huge opportunity yesterday that the Tigers managed to cash in, because remember, the next 2 stops are in Kansas City. This game is going off campus for the foreseeable future here. So hopefully that these games come back to campus sooner rather than later. But for now, who knows? It's the unknown right now. But regardless, not only just a shot in the arm for interest in the program, this was obviously huge for Missouri's NCAA tournament resume as well. Now with this kind of victory this kind of feather in your cap, Now I'd say going 500 in league play, 9-9 in the SEC for Missouri, will almost without a doubt get the Tigers into the field of 68, even with a close loss. Even if the Tigers lose to Illinois, for example, I still think 500 in the league, that's almost certainly going to get Missouri in an at-large bid into March Madness, in my opinion. Now, if Missouri beats Illinois, now you're suddenly looking like you're very much on the correct side of the bubble. Now you're almost going to have to go, 7-11 or something to end up missing the tournament as an at-large. And really, the more I think about it, playing these games in Kansas City really is kind of a bummer. Is it not? I don't know. That's just my humble opinion. But one thing that I insist that we keep, by the way, is these Missouri basketball uniforms that we're wearing this season. And from what I understand from Dennis Gates, this is a tribute to the 30th year anniversary of the 1994 perfect 14-0 Big 8 champs, that whole deal. If so, love the tribute, but you know what? Make it permanent. I love these uniforms, and man, seeing the Tigers in those golds out there against Kansas, just all the member berries started flooding back in this podcaster's head, and it just felt right, the whole thing. And it wasn't just against Kansas either. Those babies have been a huge win from the word go, even game one against Memphis this season, one that we took a loss. So that's something I'm going to insist upon, is that we keep these basketball uniforms for the rest of the season. And speaking of insisting upon things, well, with about a minute left, I saw the Missouri students starting to gather around and starting to push down farther and farther toward the baseline. And I was kind of waving my arms going, guys, too early, too early, too early. And the PA announcer, of course, reminded the students to stay off the floor. Dennis Gates, well, after the game, he said, I was about to take the mic in game and say, rush the damn court, for real. So Dennis was loving all of the celebrations there. I got some great video of it from the arena, by the way. It was a beautiful thing to see. I mean, so many people wanted to rush the court that it seemed like about half of the student section was still filled up with humans who simply, there wasn't enough room on said basketball court to get everybody out there who wanted to party it up with Tamar Bates and Mark Mitchell and everybody else out there. So what a beautiful scene. I have to say, I'm with Dennis Gates. Rush the damn court. It was definitely worth it in that moment for sure. That's a moment that anybody who was at that arena is never going to forget. That's for darn sure. And I had one, speaking of things you're not going to forget, well, somebody tried to get me on something. The old pedants love to point out my slight mistakes, I'll tell you that, because I was saying in my live show that basically Gates stuck to a 7 or 8 man rotation, and that was very much against what had been his norm so far this season. Well, one viewer said simply, he played 11 players. Well, you know what, buddy? That is 100% accurate. He did play 11 players, but it also completely misses the point, because Gates played 5 players, his starting 5, by the way, Gray, Mitchell, Robinson, Bates, and Perkins. Well, all 5 of those guys played 30-plus minutes. Only Aiden Shaw with 11 minutes, by the way, was the only other guy who got double digits. The other 5 guys played a handful, 3 to 8 minutes. That's a really tight Dennis Gates rotation. I said he played basically 7 to 8 guys, really only played 6 for the most part, but I do have to say, one of those guys who had those spot minutes, Marcus Allen, this is something I didn't point out, but just 2 absolutely clutch free throws in the final minute or so of that game from the true freshman Allen. That was one of those moments where I was saying, maybe it's not the worst thing that Allen is from Florida instead of Missouri here. He doesn't quite understand the gravity of this moment here. He doesn't quite get it as somebody who is from Florida. That's for darn sure. To him, it was just another fun game, as fun of a game as he's ever been a part of. But regardless, those were some really clutch free throws from Allen, a guy who is looking very much like a veteran player in so many ways, despite his true freshman status. And coming up, more Missouri mirth from our win over Kansas yesterday, including some of your questions and comments. But you know what? Before we start that, nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with a 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with the promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. I got to say, it usually takes more history with a player for me to sports hate him as much as I truly sports hate Hunter Dickinson. And I think all Missouri fans, especially the Missouri student section who is letting, and the Antlers in particular, I think, were letting Dickinson hear it yesterday. Man, I don't know that anybody has become more hated in as short of a time span as Hunter Dickinson has. So congratulations to him on that. All the credit in the world to him for being hateable. But you know what? Speaking of credit, just a fan of sports, a viewer on YouTube, writes, credit Dennis Gates for addressing last year's roster issues through his transfer portal and high school recruiting. On top of all that, he has clearly found the guys, or is at least coaching to one of last year's most glaring issues, getting to the foul line. Mizzou's dramatic change in free throw attempts from last year to this year needs to be highlighted more. It's been a game changer in becoming one of their identities. Well, there is no question that that is the case. Missouri almost never got to the free throw line last season because, well, they simply weren't very good at it. They were a good free throw shooting team when they got there, but they just didn't have the types of players who drew a lot of contact. So, yes, that is a complete and total change. And while a guy like Mark Mitchell sort of struggled around the basket against Dickinson, by the way, among others, but he got to the free throw line with such frequency, and he's done that consistently so far here at Missouri. Hey, once Mitchell can maybe find the touch a little bit more around the rim, he's going to really take off, in my opinion. And also, what an incredible three-pointer that he hit from the corner that basically sealed the game for the Tigers. I was saying to my mate there, Blake, that thing didn't even get over the rim, but somehow just that line drive nicked the front of the rim and fell right in. A couple of fortunate bounces for Missouri yesterday, the home rims, the members bounces, all that good stuff. We'll take it all, baby. We needed every bit of it. And you know what? After all the crap Missouri basketball has taken for the last decade plus, we deserved it. We were due. I'm definitely not apologizing for a little bit of good luck here on occasion. And speaking of good luck, it'd be sure nice if Kaleb Grill could find some good luck here sometime soon. He's been a little snake bit with injuries here the last few seasons. And one viewer says if we can get Grill back, look out. Another good defender would help on the glass and can obviously shoot it. Bates, Ant, Mitchell, Grill is a legit top four. This team has insane depth and very good size, and guys like Perkins and Warwick are going to have some great games. I see Perkins getting closer and closer. Well, I agree, especially on that last point on Perkins in particular. He is getting closer and closer. There's a reason he was one of the main 5 who played 30-plus minutes yesterday. And as to Kaleb Grill, yeah, if Missouri can get him back, the fact that Missouri was able to win without Grill yesterday, you saw it in the second half. I think we all did. Missouri really missed that extra shooter. Just basically Bates was the only perimeter threat that you really had to worry about from the three-point line coming down the stretch of that game. And to just have Grill out there too as an option down the stretch would have made such a huge difference, because not only is he a great shooter, as my viewer pointed out there, you're not losing anything defensively when he comes into the game either. He's a real hard-nosed defender and rebounder as well. So I agree, this team is looking more and more impressive all the time. I'm just so happy that we managed to eke out that victory yesterday, because had Missouri blown that lead, that would have been such a crusher just for fan spirit, the locker room, and everything else. So just to have won it, sometimes wins and losses, if you're an analytically, sort of statistically focused person, those close wins and losses don't make that much of a difference on the spreadsheet. But boy, in reality, there are certain wins and losses that are just worth so much more than others. And yesterday was definitely one of them. So thank you to Dennis Gates and his whole team. Congratulations to you guys, because that was a real victory there. And I bet all of you who have, the true freshmen, the portal guys who have only been on campus for a few months here, well, I bet you guys feel like true sons now, don't you? You feel like you're really part of the university. That was a heck of a moment, one you'll never forget, and I know I won't either. So with all that being said, appreciate you joining me here on Locked On Mizzou, as always, and making this show your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Chris Gordy's Locked On SEC podcast on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Gordy is not going to steer you wrong, and I won't either. So again, Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts as well. So until next time, I'm John Miller. This has been Locked on Mizzou.